Good morning. Welcome to Samaritan's Heart Mission Church. I'm Pastor Jerry. And I want to start with a story. I often start with a story. This is one of those stories, though, I don't really know if this is a true story. Author James Stewart Bell shared it. And maybe it's true, maybe it's not. It's really not the point. The point of the story is the point, because it has a great point. I'll give you an apple. What does that mean? Well, so here's the story. There are two people, well, there's more than two people, but two people we're referring to on a plane trip, sitting next to each other, a young boy and a man. Now, it turns out the man is a prominent theologian, has a PhD, knows the Bible up, down, back, an authority on things Jesus. And there's a little boy, don't know if he's traveling with his parents or what the situation is, but the theologian, the professional, sees that the young man is doing like Bible study stuff, maybe Sunday school, and he's kind of intrigued. I mean, after a while, he decides to engage the young man. And he says, "Son, I'll give you an apple if you can tell me something God can do." Boy ponders that for a moment and says, "Mister, I'll buy you an apple orchard if you can tell me something God can't do." I don't know. I could kind of see it happening. It doesn't really matter. So that's not the point. The point of the story is the point. Which way do we view God? You see, there are two viewpoints of God represented in that story. The boy and the man. And the man is, I wonder what God can do. Now, whether or not this really happened, and if it did, whether or not the man realized that was the worldview he was expressing, that is the worldview he was expressing. I wonder what he can do. Or, little boy, I know there is nothing God cannot do. That's a huge difference. That's 180 degrees. You see, one of them has total, complete trust in God, and the other means that we have a tendency to bet against God. Maybe God can do this, maybe he can't. I have to hedge my bets, and I have to do it myself, and that's where we get in all sorts of trouble. That's what we're going to talk about today. Because I've shared this here in church. There are people at Samaritan's Heart Mission Church. Look, there are people everywhere dealing with stuff. But I mean, there's stuff, and there's stuff, and there's been stuff. Here at Samaritan's Heart Mission Church, and as pastor, I am aware of a lot of it. So I've been on, God's had my heart, I should say, on this in recent weeks to talk about trusting God and what that really means and what that really looks like. So in my weekly devotionals this past week, or my daily devotionals this past week, I read something, one author shared something from another author. And the author that was shared was Cindy McMenamin, and I'm not familiar with her. And this was published some 20 years ago. But she has 3 principles that, as she puts it, new believers in Christ would do well to adopt. So if I know someone who has just come to Christ or is just coming to Christ, this isn't the kind of thing where I say, this is what you should do. Now, that's not what I should say to them. But these are 3 things that can help you, 3 principles to adopt into your heart as you grow into Jesus, and you'll see where trusting God comes into play. First, tell God. Tell God what? Everything. Tell God everything. Everything that's on your heart. Everything you're facing, everything you're rejoicing over, your fears. Well, I'm not supposed to be afraid, so I shouldn't. He knows you're afraid. Knock it off. He knows you're afraid. Go ahead and share that with him. Say, look, I know I'm not supposed to be afraid. I know I'm supposed to trust you unconditionally, 100% completely, but right now, I'm afraid. I'm lonely. I'm anxious. I'm depressed. I'm an addict who wants to use. I'm an addict who did use. He knows it all. He knows it all. So, tell him all, share with him. Why? Because he really does want to hear you say it. He wants to know that you can be that frank and honest with him. An oldie but a goodie, God above all else. Because you see, when you're new in this Jesus stuff, well, this is great. I'm saved. I have grace to cover all of my sins. Boy, living the life I was living is going to be a lot easier now. No. You surrender that life. You give it up to God. And again, one that seems really obvious and what we're focusing on today, trust absolutely in God. But that is so much easier said than done, in large part because what does it really mean? I mean, think about it. What really does that mean? I trust you, Lord. Oh, there's not much money in the checkbook, but I trust you. That's trusting God like this. So this is what I want to dig into today. Again, my life has been filled with this, my own personal life, challenges I have in trusting God unconditionally, no fingers crossed, and people that I'm ministering to. What does absolute trust look like? That's the first thing you got to know if you have it. If I don't know what an expensive $200,000 Ferrari looks like, and someone says, "Here's your Ferrari," well, I'm going to accept that. What does absolute trust look like? Well, one, trusting that He will provide the following. We have 3 W's for you today. That He will show you the way. He will make the way. Whatever the way. What does that mean? Here's you. Here's where God wants you. Here's this thing in the way. He'll make the way to where God wants you to be, not to where you want to be. Oh, you mean I want that $600,000 job and a year job? I don't know why I picked 600. I was thinking $1 million. I want that $1 million a year job and the beachfront property and all of that. Make the way, Lord, make the way. He will if that's His plan for you. But if that's a plan that's grown out of the little kingdom of you, not so much. So He'll make the way that He wants you to follow. The what? The provision that you'll need on that way. And the where. This is a really important part I teased here a couple seconds ago. Follow me. Not me, God. Follow Him. All right, the way. There are a couple of famous, well-known stories of God making the way where there ain't no way. If you're familiar with that contemporary Christian song, let me tell you about my Jesus. He makes a way where there ain't no way. And indeed, He does. But remember, it's His way. He makes the way His way. And that's where we often get tripped up, because we think we know what it looks like when He clears the path. Wrong. No, we don't. Biggest mistake we make, and it's why then we get angry with God, because God's not following our game plan. What's the deal, God? So there are 2 stories. We're going to start with the first. And we find it we're starting first chronologically. We find it in Exodus chapter 14, verses 10 through 22. Very, 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 very famous moment in the Bible when God has called Moses to lead the Israelite people out of slavery in Egypt. And Moses, of course, reluctant. God deals with that. God says, you're going to communicate, you and your brother Aaron, going to communicate to Pharaoh. There are going to be 10 plagues. He's finally going to let you and your people go, and you'll be off to the promised land. All of that happens. Then Pharaoh changes his mind, and he has his army pursue the Israelites. And what suddenly seemed like a clear way is not a clear way, because there's an army behind them. That's where we pick up in verse 10. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified, cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there are no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" Yeah, they're not seeing a way. They're not seeing a way. "What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Did we not say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'?" No, they didn't. They didn't say that at all. They're saying it now because they don't see the way. It would have been better, for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid." It's a phrase you see a number of times between the Old and the New Testament. Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me?" That's a great question. What's the matter with you people? Moses, we had the staff meeting. Remember, we discussed this. You're going to do this, this, and this. You're going to head out of there, and I'm going to protect you. What part of that didn't you understand? What part of that don't we understand? Don't be too hard on Moses and the Israelites. Come on. We do this all the time. Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I'm the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and horsemen. This is going to be to my glory. Don't worry. I know how this ends. You don't. I do. Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, so this is what they were following, this pillar of cloud, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to the one side, light to the other side, so neither went near the other all night long, kept them divided. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through on the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Bible states that so matter-of-factly, doesn't it? Then Moses kind of did this thing, and the Red Sea parted, and they walked through it, and it all worked out. No, it's amazing. It's amazing. God parted the Red Sea. He made a way where there ain't no way. And there ain't no way the Egyptians saw that coming. I'm sorry, that the Israelites saw that. Well, the Egyptians either. But that the Israelites saw that coming. No. No, not at all. This is what God does. He makes the way. And how many times in your life did God answer your prayer and make a way, and it's not the way you thought, and maybe in part because you weren't going the way God wanted you to go. You had your own way in mind. Now we jump ahead to Joshua chapter 6. This is, of course, in Joshua, Moses is deceased. Joshua has taken over. Joshua is going to take the Israelites to the promised land. And of course, there are conflicts with other peoples along the way. God had that all planned out. Chapter 6, Joshua. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out, no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands." Really? Because there's this wall, see? And I'm not really seeing how they're in our hands. So help me out with that a little bit. God says, happy to do that. I have delivered them into your hands along with its king, all its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, and everyone straight in. Can you imagine that for just a moment? Okay, so think of Joshua, essentially, he's the general in this story. And he tells the troops, all right, guys, we have a battle plan. Got it straight from God. You're going to love this. We're going to, what? No, we don't know that they did that. They trusted God. He made a way in a way they never saw it coming. Spoiler alert, the walls come down just the way God said they would. What is your Red Sea? What is your wall of Jericho? Why hasn't it come down? Why hasn't it parted? Why hasn't God made a way where there ain't no way? I'll give you a hint. It's not a God thing. Trust that God has a plan. Trust that you most likely have no idea what that plan looks like. And trust that the way is probably something you will never imagine and exactly where he wants you to go. But no, I thought we were, the Israelites went, oh, we can go around. No. We do the same thing. The what? 2 huge stories in the Bible about Jesus providing the what. First comes in John chapter 2, and John says this is the first reported sign or miracle by Jesus. The wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Again, very matter-of-factly. They're out of wine. Could you make some? The streaming series The Chosen handles this beautifully, where everyone's running around with their hair on fire. The vintner who brought the wine, the servants, the family of the bride. You have to understand, Jewish wedding celebrations can last 3 days. To run out of wine on the first day, ay. But Jesus says, woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come. Now, some people think this is disrespectful. It's not. The woman thing might not be the way we think of it today. Woman! And at some point he acquiesces, because the next thing we read is Mary says to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. See that? Draw some out. It doesn't say draw out some water. It doesn't say draw out some wine. It says draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They did. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. That's interesting. Tasted the water that had been turned into wine. I think it was just me, raises some questions about what exactly was in there. He didn't realize where it had come from, though the servants who'd drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now. And then John reports what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed him. But did they? This is the thing. Did they? Jesus provided something miraculous, and they remembered it, right? And then because they remembered that, they never doubted him again, right? Wrong. It's the same way it's wrong with us, and we do doubt him. Matthew chapter 14, beginning with verse 13. Very, very famous passage. It comes right after Jesus learns of the death by beheading of his cousin and the man who heralded him, John the Baptist. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed the sick. They all came wanting Jesus to do something for them, and he did. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." 5,000 men, but women and children are not counted, anywhere from 10 to 15,000 people. Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." But, what? How are we going to do that? "We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, they answered. "Bring them here to me." How many times does Jesus say that to me? Bring your need to me. But what you really need, not what you want, what you really need, bring it to me. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he's giving thanks to God the Father for providing. Hint, hint. He gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate, as I mentioned, about 5,000, besides women and children. So estimates are it was 10,000, 15,000 people. What's your empty jar? What's your empty basket? What is it? What is it? Why aren't you trusting him? This is really big time stuff. I can't ask God for this. I got to handle it myself. Well, that's what they were thinking. That's what the Israelites were thinking. Hey, God's got to help us. This is not working out. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to blah, 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 blah. We do that. What seems impossible? What provision? And maybe it's not food, water, clothing, housing. Maybe it's companionship. Maybe it's health. What is it? You're not trusting God. Again, you have to trust the way he's wanting to send you. You have to trust the way that he wants to make that way. You have to trust the way that he's going to provide. The problem is we lock in on how we think that should look like. Finally, the where. Follow me. Follow me. This is Luke, verses 9, 23, 24. Then he said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it." Jesus is talking about here is total, complete, unconditional surrender. Some Bible commentary I found points something out. The deny, that verb, deny yourself, past tense. Deny and be done with it. Deny the right to yourself. Deny the right to your little kingdom of you and give yourself to me. Do that. And it's done. It's past tense. Take up your cross daily, past tense, even though you need to do it every day. You commit every day you're going to wake up, you're going to take up your cross. That means you're going to die to Jesus. You're going to die to him so you can rise with him, just like he did. That's what baptism is all about and signifies. Follow me, present tense, every morning, every day. You have to get those other things out of the way. As the NIV application commentary puts it, this means that discipleship involves the fundamental commitment of self-denial of your whole self, not of a cookie or whatever, and bearing one's cross. While the call to follow Jesus is constant, growing out of the base commitments, discipleship, therefore, requires a basic shift of orientation as we align ourselves with God's will through a humble renunciation of our own agenda To deny ourselves in the context of cross-bearing means that the world may kill us for walking outside its paths. But we are ready to do so because God has called us to walk a different way. His way. His way. Meaning the manner in which and the direction in which. To pick up the cross, we must put something down. What is my, can't put it down. All right, I've surrendered my whole life, but. I've surrendered my whole life, but this, but that. What things are there? What do I need to put down so I can truly pick up my cross, surrender my whole self, and trust Jesus? See, when you can't do that, you're betting against God. And you're betting on yourself. I know we don't look at it that way, but that's what it is. So whatever way He needs to make for you, whatever that is, whatever provision, whatever direction you need from Him. This is an everyday thing. Spirit-filled never changes. But tapping into that power of the Spirit and truly surrendering your whole heart to Jesus, which I haven't. I don't know about you, but I haven't. You haven't, because it doesn't happen on this side of heaven. But we build toward it, we build toward it, we build toward it. And each day can be a joy of a little more and a little more. And a little more trust, a little more Jesus, a little less you. It's amazing. If you're not on that track, I pray you get on that way soon. God bless.